Welcome to the Gauntlet Podcast. I'm Lowell, and once again, we're doing an interview series with some important people in the field, people who have interesting thoughts, people who are developers. And today we're here with Liz Chaipraditkul.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
You have done a lot of projects. The first one that I saw that you had worked on was Witch Fated Souls, which was a very successful Kickstarter. And you've also worked on AMP Year 1. You contributed to the Baby Bestiary 2, I believe. You did a module for Atlantis, the Second Age. Mm-hmm. And we have a couple of Kickstarter projects that you're working on right now, SIG and Cold Shadows, right?
Yeah, I'm working on Cold Shadows and a few other projects here and there.
Oh, yeah. You're really, really busy.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I really enjoy writing. So for me, my business is my main work, but I love doing all these small projects because it kind of takes you away to a different world, and it's lovely.
And I want to come back around. We want to talk about The Monster,
okay,
another successful Kickstarter that you had, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. I'll tell you the reason that I really wanted to talk with you is I didn't back the 7th Sea Kickstarter, but I got a review copy of the core book. Then I saw Heroes and Villains pop up in Drive-Thru RPG. So I was like, oh, that seems useful, so I'll order that. And it's one of the few times I've started reading a book like that, and I couldn't stop. I read cover to cover, enjoyed it immensely. It's an NPC book, but it's so much more than that. And Sherry, my wife, she picked it up, and she read it cover to cover as well. And that's really not something that she does. And both loved it. This is an incredible NPC resource for 7th Sea, but it's so much more, and it's a huge project, right?
Yeah, it was pretty big. It started with the deck. There's 2 decks. There's a hero deck and there's a villain deck, which has 52 heroes and 52 villains. So on each one of those cards, you have to do an elevator pitch of who these people are, in 2 sentences or 3 sentences, and then we had to translate that to the book. Yeah, and it was an undertaking, but I mean, it was a joy to do it, basically, because I mean, it's a kind of unique book in the fact that on every page you have a different story of a different person. So it's very hard to tire of it because, you get to explore these different worlds and these different experiences that each person is having.
So when you knew you were going to be doing kind of the lead development on this, you mentioned doing the hero deck and having that journey. What was sort of your first steps going into the project?
I think, first of all, to make sure that we had a good spread of people, just in general, that everyone was represented. For me, that was really important. Thea is a very varied place. You know what I mean? And at one point, I guess there's going to be an Asian setting as well. And, we have Ifri, we have the Crescent Empire, we have the New World, which is basically the kind of South America. And so for me, it was important that we had a good spread of people. And you do that very much by the numbers. So I just made sure we had the right percentage of everyone in there. But we had to a little bit focus on Thea, of course, because that's the main book that we brought out, was a book about Thea.
You mentioned the tight deadlines in your little introduction there.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that challenge? Because you made a point in the book of mentioning that. So what was that like?
Oh, running the fastest marathon of your life. I mean, the thing is that I've worked for larger companies before, but not in such a high position. And of course, for my own company, I mean, I'm my own boss, so I can be the worst with deadlines ever. But I think there's been a real focus in 7th Sea and really trying to bring out quality products for people when we've promised them. And so that was kind of a mad rush to the end. And, making sure that everyone hit their deadlines and putting in those extra hours. But in the end, I hope it really shows how much, love and time we put into it in relatively a short timeline. You know what I mean? Those.
So can I ask about what was the timeline for the project?
Not to
roughly.
Say that roughly. I think from start to finish, I think we did it in about 4 months, I want to say. 4 months,
Whoa.
5 months. I mean, I'm for Heroes, for the deck, we had 2. And then we were rounding it up by the time we started into the book. So it all is kind of mashed in for me. So it may be slightly longer. Don't quote me on the exact time.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's been a really big part of my life. It feels like going to school again, It's like something that you do every day, homework and all that.
So now you had to kind of work with and oversee, I think, 13 writers, including yourself.
Mhm.
What was that like? And maybe what advice would you give to maybe new people in the RPG industry who are trying to get collaborators or contributors to like a Kickstarter project or something like that? What would you say to them?
I think communication is really important. I'm sure everybody says this, but for me, as the kind of the manager, the developer of the project, I'm the one who's looking at the timeline and making sure that it's all going to fit in correctly. And so for me, if a writer's late, it's totally understandable. People can get sick, you're going to be at a con, or you just had like a terrible day and you can't bring yourself to write, which is a real thing. But if you communicate that, then the person who's kind of overseeing the project, or if you're the person overseeing the project, you're able to work that in. You're like, okay, well, this person gets an extra 4 days, then I can start on this. So I would say really talk to the people that you have and kind of build up that relationship with them. I think that's really important, that they know also that they can be late. Because, it's human error. You're working with people, you're not working with robots. So it's really important to have that understanding there. And if you can do that, then you can plan around everything else. I mean, that's the most important, that you get like awesome writing and that everyone's healthy and happy.
The book is amazingly diverse. I just want to say this, and I can't stress this enough. It's diverse culturally. We have all genders and orientations and body shapes and ages. And also, because I went through and kind of mapped it out, it's incredibly diverse in terms of the mechanics that you engage with. On the game side, you've managed to bring that together. I wonder if you could talk about the challenges of putting together a book that is that diverse, and what was your thinking when you went into that?
Well, I think my main thing is that it's sad when you open a book and you don't see anyone who could remotely be you, in a way. And as someone who's Asian, like I do experience that quite often. Unless it's a book about Asian themes, like you don't often see people in the book that look like you. And it's not a nice feeling if every book is that. So like that was my main thought going in. But I must say that like I had a really good team behind me. So, first of all, I wasn't the only person who looked over the draft. So like I proposed all these characters, then the staff writers took a look at them, John and Mark took a look at them, and then we have Marissa who did the art direction for the book. So then once we came in with our ideas and our pitches, and I would say like I only had ideas for about 50% of the characters, like what they should look like. Marissa came in and she was really like, okay, well, let's see, can this person be Asian? I'm like, well, we don't say where she's from. And she's like, great, let's make her Asian. Can this person be from the Crescent Empire? And then together we kind of worked through each and every character and kind of made sure that the art choices in some ways also slightly influenced stuff that we changed in the backgrounds.
It's also, you've got a lot of kind of connections between characters. There are stories that are referenced from the hero side and the villain side. Can you talk about that? Any of those that you're particularly happy with or that you think are really interesting to think about?
I love the two twins. So you have Victor and his sister, Agatha. And there's, of course, it's like one hero and one villain who are like pitted against each other for a kingdom. That's one of my favorites just because I had thought about it really early on. And then I had two writers who just kind of took it and ran with it and made, really made Agatha just the worst person possible. And then made Victor, her brother, basically this Disney princess. He's kind of like the equivalent of a Disney prince, but then, he has this, he's going and he's singing to animals and things like that. So I love the juxtaposition between those two characters. And we tried to bring a lot of that in. We also have like the White Lady of Hirschsplit Tower and the Schlammbahn. Mm-hmm. That's another one I really like too. Just because, you hope that someone is going to play the Schlammbahn or something like that, and he's going to be able to get his memories back in someone's campaign. Like, that would be, for me, the best thing ever, I
actually want to give you an example of that. I ran 2 sessions, and I used the characters from Heroes and Villains. I went through and picked out about a dozen of them, and one of them was the Schlammbahn, and somebody took that, and the writing is open enough that they were like, well, maybe the way he's presented, maybe he is under, like, an actual magical curse. But like the mud and stuff is part of that curse. And that was how they pictured it. And that was a huge element for them in the 2 sessions that they played. So you've written it in such a way that you have a lot of room for players to embrace and add on to.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I would love to be a fly on the wall just to hear everything that they did. But I mean, that's the hope though. Like, I mean, I always think like when you're writing game supplements, at least for me as a developer and as a writer, I always hope that people add their own things into it. And also with the characters. I mean, if there's something you don't like in it, it's not written in stone, just throw it out, add your own thing, add your own spin. And I mean, with the Schlamann, that's awesome. The idea that the mud is part of that magical curse or something like that.
What are like a couple of your favorite heroes in the book?
I wrote Tatiana Pagini, and she is a courtesan dominatrix, and I really enjoyed writing her write up because, like, we want to keep it friendly enough that kids can also read through the book, but I also tried to make it a little bit tongue in cheek about her clients needing a firm hand. And so for me, that was personally just really fun to write. And I also really like, oh no, I hope I get her name right, Quinn Leroy. And she's a Montaigne character. And she is like an epic party crasher.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I really love the idea of just like, a hero that is going into all these big parties and dressing up as if she's very rich and affluent. And those are two of my favorites.
Awesome. And on the villain side?
Oh, I really love Mary Galloway. That was written by one of our writers, Betsy. Mary's story is beautiful. And Betsy had actually made it a little bit longer, and I had to cut away from it. And I think that was one of my most painful editing passes, because I'm just like, I want to leave everything. Let's just give her 2 pages. It'll be fine. But in the end, we had to fit it down to 1. But the story, I find, is told so very well. And there's so much there for that character. I mean, she's a vicious, horrible woman. And you hate her, but somehow you also just feel so bad for her because what she's been through.
Well, give us the elevator pitch so people listening can see the kind of really interesting stories. Mary Galloway is particularly brutal of the villains. The story there is dark.
Yeah, so basically Mary's husband, he sold his wife and his daughter basically into indentured servitude on a ship. And the ship gets stuck far in the north in all this ice. And the crazed captain decides that it's a good idea to start eating people. And of course, something tragic happens with Mary. I won't spoil it, but that flips something in her mind. And it just breaks her, after everything that she's been through. And she rallies all the people, all the servants on the ship together to like take over from their masters. And then she just becomes the worst pirate woman ever with her huge meat cleaver. She has this meat cleaver, and it's pictured in the book. It's pretty badass.
So Anna Kay did all of the character illustrations?
She did. Yeah, she did.
That's kind of amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean, I was very impressed. And the speed in which she got them out was, I mean, I was just very impressed in how well she did. And a lot of the characters I love. There's a Usurin, her name's Michaela. I forget her last name at this moment, but she has 2 big dogs, and it's one of my favorite pictures in the book. It's very impressive and beautiful.
One of the ideas that really comes out in this book that is sort of hinted at in the core book is the idea of redeeming villains. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we always say in 7th Sea that heroes are heroes and villains are villains. So far as, like a hero should never feel bad about taking down a villain because this is actually a very terrible person. And just like, the villains will have no qualms about doing something evil. But I mean, in between there is the possibility for redemption as much as there is for a hero to fall. So for us, it was important to add in these extra parts of these people who are definitely on the wrong path. But, there's something even more heroic about rather than just slaying somebody or like, putting them in jail, actually trying to help them become a better person. So really using villain shots at redemption to also make heroes more heroic in a way. And that's what we tried to do. And also just show that, there's a spectrum of good and evil, basically. And people have just as much shot to try to change who they are. You know what I mean? And it's hard work, but you can do it. And we tried to provide some mechanics for that as well.
It's great. And it's one of the things that really, for me, made 7th Sea go, oh, this is really something I want to do. That idea, bringing that to the forefront. It's just really striking. I apologize I keep fanboying here, but it's a really solid project. Is there anything else you want to say about heroes and villains?
No, I hope that people enjoy the characters and can use them in their games, and that also it brings Thea alive for people. That was mainly what we tried to do with the book, is tried to give GMs and players characters to use at a moment's notice, and someone that you can relate to, or someone that you immediately want to rally against, to make the story more interesting. And that's basically what we wanted to do with the project.
Did you feel any pressure that you were going to be the first book after the core book?
Yes, I was really nervous about it, mainly because the core book is so strong. The core team did such a good job on the core book. It's a big thing to follow up, and 7th Sea has such a legacy. I mean, I think the proof of that is in the Kickstarter. So you really want to make sure that you do the legacy proud. And I'm so proud of my team and the work they did. And I hope that shows how passionate we were about the project.
Your lead developer on the Crescent Empire.
Yes.
Okay. I find that amazingly exciting. It's an area I'm very interested in. What can you tell us about what you're doing with that you can share at this point?
I'm really excited. So I'm a huge fan of the Ottoman Empire and things like that. It's something like, you grow up and you kind of study, and I love also visiting, Turkey and things like that. I've been there more than a couple of times. And so when I was asked, like, what other books might you want to do? I was like, the Crescent Empire? Has not everyone been fighting over that, So I was very happy to get that opportunity. But yeah, the Crescent Empire is going to be, if you're familiar with first edition, very different than first edition. We have some similarities, but basically the Crescent Empire is a very high society region. It's the home of poetry, of education. It's kind of completely a polar opposite almost to Thea in a way, in terms of some of the darker and more rough areas that they have. People should just be ready if they're excited for political intrigue and poetry dueling and sort of all that high society things. Then I think they'll like the Crescent Empire. Also, a lot of exploration. We have a lot of cool areas. Yeah, we have 5 different nations.
Oh, wow.
And all of them with different religions, different peoples, different tribes. And of course, there's still the ample opportunity for all the swashbuckling you could possibly want to do in scrolling deserts and mountains.
Okay, that sounds super cool. So one of the questions that has been talked about more in recent years is the question of RPG's history of Orientalism. Mm-hmm. Of problematic treatment of Asian cultures and Middle Eastern cultures and Near Eastern cultures, and the fact that we still have people calling it the Orient in some things. What's your experience with that, and how do you think that you want to counter that with, say, the Crescent Empire?
Well, it's a difficult topic also because it's personal to me. Uh-huh. I always think, and I always maybe possibly naively I think that everyone comes from a place of trying to do their best. And when you encounter these stereotypes that are negative, that genuinely people are doing it either because they really have a passion, unfortunately, in a wrong way, have a passion for the subject, and then take it in a direction that it shouldn't go. That's my personal view of it. And I think it's our jobs as developers and fans and role players and podcasters just to make sure that when we encounter those things, have those discussions with people, because sometimes people just don't know. You know what I mean? And my general rule of thumb when I'm developing is to just treat people like people. I think the Orient, so to say, is often fetishized in Western culture. And I think that comes from a lack of humanity in a way, of not just treating everyone as you would treat anyone from your home country, which is with respect, which is with acknowledging that people are different, and not different as in, oh, they're foreign, but just as in everyone has a different way of communicating and who they are as a person. And I think if you treat people like people, then you're able basically to counteract those kind of negative stereotypes and having a lot of discussions. I also think as a person that you should never shy away from a discussion. if people want to have that with you and they're like, hey, I don't know about this. What can you tell me about this topic? Then I always try to have those talks with people, mainly on a private scale because I'm not that good with big public appearances. But yeah.
Can you think of anything that you've seen in RPGs that you think has done a good job that come to mind?
For Asian representation, like not off the top of my head, but for example, just showing a good variety, range of people, games like Monster Hearts, that, shows people in every light. I mean, race, sexuality, anything. Monster Hearts is great. I think the new edition of D&D is getting there. You know what I mean? Like, I was really happy when I opened 5th edition. I was like, oh my God, good job, guys. You made it. So, yeah, those are 2 games that I'm particularly proud of. But I mean, Monster Heart has always been great. 1st edition and now the 2nd edition. Can't wait.
I want to ask you, one of the things I know historically is in this period, certainly a different area, but the Barbary Coast and even in the Ottoman Empire, there was kidnapping in that period as a hostage taking. I'm talking about Elizabethan times, so on. Are you dealing with that issue?
What's nice about 7th Sea is that it's a fantasy setting. So what we've done is we've taken different cultures kind of from the Middle East Ottoman Empire area, and we've taken them as snapshots in different periods of time. So, for example, we have Sarmian, which is going to be our Israel-Lebanon region. And we've said that some of the things in history didn't happen, or they happened a different way, which means that we still have a very strong Yidichi, which is a Jewish nation, which also is Dinist, Muslim, basically. And we have a mix there. So we have a lot of different nations growing up differently and how they fit together. So basically what we've done is we said that in the Crescent Empire, there isn't slavery. There is indentured servitude. Basically, people can sell themselves into indentured servitude to get out of certain things. But in this book in particular, we're not dealing with that. And it's the same thing that we decided that there's no sexism in the Crescent Empire. Of course, there's probably people who are sexist. I'm not going to erase that or something. But, it's the same as the main game in 7th Sea. Men and women and others are completely equal. And it's no different in the Crescent Empire. And I know that there are some other books that are going to deal with slavery and things that are happened, but that's not what we're focusing on.
Awesome. Sherry has always shied away from any game that has a kind of a historical echo to it because so many of them, they're fantasy games, but they still keep kind of the really tough gender disparity and all of that. And that bugs her. So I'm really happy to hear that that's the direction you've decided to go.
Yeah, we had discussions about it and, what should we do here? But it's like, if we're going to take this time period seriously, it's going to suck for women no matter where you go. And I personally, at least when I'm relaxing, that's not the type of game I want to play. There's games I could go to, for example, to explore those topics, but 7th Sea wouldn't be one of them. I want to, climb the rigging of a ship with a flintlock pistol in my mouth and, shoot a kraken. That's what I want to do in 7th Sea. Or in the Crescent Empire, I want to ride my steed across an epic desert while, punching Jin in the face. I don't want to deal with someone telling me that I can't do something because I'm a woman.
Awesome. Are we going to see some new magic systems then in the Crescent Empire book?
Each nation has a new sorcery.
Ooh.
We're also going to have mass combat mechanics in the book, and we're also going to have poetry dueling because we've decided that in the Crescent Empire, that basically normal dueling is totally legal in the Crescent Empire, and actually it's preferable to poetry dueling, which is like this verbal battle that you have with other people, which can actually make you lose standing in society. And that's something you really don't want. So for example, if you're fighting with your neighbor about something, you may prefer to just do let's just duel to first blood rather than A, dealing with the bureaucracy, or B, losing some kind of face around our neighbors. So it's a very interesting dynamic, and we have a really fun system for it.
Oh, wow. Such a great idea. I've got a number of your projects that I want to talk about, but the most recent one that you completed on Kickstarter is The Monster. Can you tell our listeners how that came about, what it is? Because I'm very curious.
Yeah, so basically the monster is part of the Make 100 initiative that Kickstarter ran in January, I think it is. Their idea was that they wanted creators just to make 100 of something, so like kind of a capsule project. And it could be really anything. And I had my mom over actually, and we were going through all my old school stuff. And it turns out that I was a very avid publisher as a child. So far as I actually, I created all my own books, I illustrated them, and then I brought them to school libraries so they could all be laminated. It was a very intense project. And one of the books I found was a very confused book about a monster chasing a group of children. And I think kind of me as a child dealing with some, I don't know, sexuality questions. And just, it's a mishmash of a lot of things. So I thought it would be funny to rewrite it from an adult's perspective and kind of tell the story, but then also turn it into a gameable dungeon map, because it has a really weird thing in it. Like it has a roller coaster going through a haunted house and things. So I thought that'd be super fun, like just to have a dungeon map of that with all different rooms.
And it's systemless, as I understand?
Yeah. So basically each room will have a description and like random generation charts for like things you can find in there, but people will be able to add their own system. So like if you have like fate, for example, you could put it there, or you could do some OSR rules for it. And we unlocked one stretch goal, which was for the 5th edition rules. So classic D&D we'll put in there.
I want to ask about Witch. I have my deck here. Okay. I have my copy of the book over here. Picked those up at Origins last year. As I understand it, having talked to a couple people, that you did the vast majority of the work on that. And that was a very large and challenging project. And I just want to say, it does not look like a project that had so few creators. I mean, it's amazing. It just looks great. Like, what kind of lessons did you learn doing Witch?
So many. So many. Oh my goodness. Like I feel like, when I was done Witch, it felt like you could write a book of like things you should never do again. I've learned so much, and I think get a proofer. I think that's one of the things that I learned. I've since hired a proofer for all my projects, I must say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just so many things. I think you can't please everybody. That's something that I've learned. Also, a little bit of that you need to stand up for your work, I think, and that you shouldn't expect it to be perfect, which is very difficult for me because I'm a perfectionist. I mean, it's like a child in a way, and of course you wouldn't expect your kid to be perfect. So, this was the first book that I produced, and I truly love it. I love the setting, and I hope other people do as well. But yeah, I think in the future just more people would be good. And I mean the campaign, I honestly thought that I would just make my amount and that it wouldn't go anywhere else from there. And the fact that we had so many backers and so many people who supported system was just overwhelmingly awesome. So, but I think I'm better prepared for that now, to get everything done and to a quality that people expect.
It's so ambitious. You did the screen, you did these beautiful tarot cards, the book is well illustrated, the layout is sharp and clean. I'm just going to again say it's amazing what you did there.
Yeah.
This episode of the Gauntlet Podcast is being sponsored by our friends at Nocturnal Media. So listeners, I am personally a big fan of what I like to call horror being done to children. I love the sort of kids on bikes genre of movie and TV show. Think E.T. or Stranger Things. I like anything that kind of explores childhood terror and how children perceive things to be either scarier than they would be in real life or how they sort of overcome like fear, right? I love all that. I think those are great. I myself have written a couple of game-ish sort of things that explore that theme. And so because of that, I'm pretty excited about something that Nocturnal is going to be publishing. It is an English translation of a Spanish game called Innocence. Here's a little blurb. Do you remember the time when any shadow could turn into a monster? Do you remember the strange noises against your window on windy nights? What about when you closed your eyes and hid underneath the bed covers so you couldn't see what was poking through the slightly ajar closet door? Would you like to go back? Would you dare? They are waiting for you, and they are hungry. So I backed this on Kickstarter. It was recently kickstarted. It was a sort of a short frame Kickstarter, only a week. And so we weren't able to tell you about it on the show in time because it was such a short Kickstarter. But it looks like a really, really fun game. I just dig it. I dig this as a theme, like I said. And I think anytime we can see role-playing games that were published in other languages being brought over so that those of us who speak English and only English can experience them, I think that's pretty badass. In fact, Nocturnal does a lot of that. They do a lot of sort of English translations of other games. So if that sounds interesting to you, I'm not sure what the time frame is for when it's going to be more widely available beyond the Kickstarter. I know the text is basically done. The translation's done. I don't think there's much more to do for the game. So I will just direct you to Nocturnal's website and to keep your eyes open for Innocence. I think it's going to be a really neat project. And thanks again to Nocturnal for sponsoring the show.
Let me ask about a couple other things. Now, I saw that you had listed on Angry Hamster, Familiars of Terra. Is that still something that you're working on, or is that on hold?
Yeah, Familiars of Terra basically is our next big project that we're doing. We're going to release it this year. We actually have a Familiars of Terra Quick Start and Adventure is going to be released on a free RPG day, and then it'll subsequently be on our site. And we're going to do a Kickstarter this year, probably later in the summer. We're thinking more August, September. And I'm really excited because which is definitely an adult game, but Familiars of Terra is basically our family game. And it's based around using a deck of cards instead of dice. And it's set in a world where everyone has their own animal familiar. And it's kind of like this piece of their soul, or not, depending on how you think. And you adventure around. So it's very much a combination of like His Dark Materials and Pokemon in a way. And I'm super excited for it. I've been playing the game a lot, though, so I may be biased just because we've been playtesting everything. But it has a really cool dueling fighting system where you basically can use powers and slam down cards against your opponents. And also the world. I'm really excited for the world.
His Dark Materials in Pokemon may be the greatest pitch line I've ever heard. I'm going to tell you right there. That's great.
Well,
wow.
I'd be more than happy to send you a preview copy if you're interested.
I would love to see that. I would very much. That sounds awesome. You're also are contributing to SIG, Manual of the Prime, right? And to Cold Shadows, which really blew the doors off in terms of its Kickstarter. Can you talk about what you're doing for those?
Yeah, for SIG, I wrote one of their kind of settings for the Manuals of Prime, so one of these kind of Prime worlds, and it's called the Dimming Twilight, and it's basically where stars go to die, and the idea is that stars aren't actually truly dead till the last of their light is gone from the universe. So all the stars that we see in our night sky, for example, they're still alive. They're just kind of like in this purgatory area. And when they're there, what they do is they have these keepers and they tell their stories to the keepers. And the keepers kind of live to groom them and care for them. And it's kind of this area that you can explore with all these beautiful stars and you can walk around in the cosmos.
But then on the complete polar opposite,
yeah.
What about for Cold Shadows?
Yeah. So that I'm working on Cold War espionage. I have two topics that I'm writing about. One, I'm writing about Cold War fighting styles. So we're going to get into all those cool mechanics and, badass combat moves you can use. And then I'm also writing about Cold War kind of cinema and media that we have and women's roles within that. And talking about, I think some of the stuff that we broached on it in this interview, which is realism versus just having a fun time being a spy.
Awesome. Anything else that I haven't touched on that you want to talk about?
We have another project that we're working on for Angry Hamster Publishing, and this is going to be released next year, but it's kind of the spiritual follow-up of Witch, and that is Afterlife. And the idea is in Afterlife that you play someone who's died, but you don't go to heaven or hell. You go to this endless desert. And the idea is that you have to go in and out of all these different afterlives to try to find out where your soul belongs. Oh. It's using the same mechanics as Witch, but we've tightened them up slightly. We've tweaked a couple of things that aren't in the core book and made doing things like casting magical spells easier, and tightened up some other combat mechanics, which I won't get into. But I'm really excited for the world.
So if you were going to give like one piece of advice to people who are thinking about like getting into RPGs and doing, jumping in, doing a Kickstarter, what would be the one thing that you would tell them?
I think just believe in yourself and be open. Be open to advice from others, but still try to stick to your guns and try to create something that you're proud of and that brings joy to other people.
Awesome. Listeners, that's our episode. Thank you for listening. Of course, please rate, subscribe, comment, all of that at your various feed sites of choice. You can follow The Gauntlet at www.gauntlet-rpg.com. We also are on Google+. We have both the Gauntlet community and the Gauntlet Hangouts, where we arrange online games. We also have a Patreon, and you can search for us on a Gauntlet Patreon as well. Of course, at the podcast site, you can check out our other podcasts, including Discern Realities on Dungeon World and Plus One Forward on PBTA, as well as Comic Strip AP. So we got a lot of stuff out there. So you can check that out. Liz, thank you again for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And I want to stress again, for anyone who's listening, please check out Heroes and Villains. It's an amazing book. An amazing book.
Thank you.
Today we're here with Liz Chaipraditkul. Terrible. Chaipraditkul.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Oh my God. I'm so... I'm going to ask him to leave that in so that they can see what a terrible person I am.
No, honestly, don't worry about it.